afternoon. Kind of starting the stream slightly late. Kind of ran into something on the way home when I was biking home from church. But yeah, before we get started on my stream, I want to sing this song that stood out to me that we sang for worship today at my church. It's called "Hymn of Heaven" by Phil Wickham. Let's sing that first. Year of heaven, where pain is gone and mercy fills the streets, to look upon the one who bled to save me and walk with him for all eternity. There will be a day when all will bow before him. There will be a day when death will be no more, standing face to face with he who died and rose again. Holy, holy is the Lord. Good morning. Every prayer we prayed in desperation, the songs of faith we sang through doubt and fear. In the end, we'll see that it was worth it. He returns to wipe our tears. Sorry. This worship song is new to me. There will be a day when all will bow before him. There will be a day when death will be no more, standing face to face with he who died and rose again. Holy, holy is the Lord. And on that day, we join the resurrection and stand beside the heroes of the faith. With one voice, 1,000 generations sing, worthy is the Lamb that was slain. And on that day, we join the resurrection and stand beside the heroes of the faith. With one voice, 1,000 generations sing, worthy is the Lamb who was slain. I'm missing something. Forever he shall reign. So let it be today. We shout the hymn of heaven with angels and the saints. We raise a mighty roar. Glory to our God, who gave us life beyond the grave. Holy, holy is the Lord. So let it be today. We shout the hymn of heaven with angels and the saints. We raise a mighty roar. Glory to our God, who gave us life beyond the grave. Holy, holy is the Lord. Holy, holy is the Lord. thought that would go better because I just sang it at my church. I apologize. The reason why I wanted to sing that song is because I had a different song in mind. It's just God was like, let's sing this one on my way home. So, it's okay. Anyway, good morning, Mango King. Thanks for coming again. So, I always start my stream with a recap because sometimes I get new viewers. Happy Sunday. So the reason why I made this stream series is to share my testimony on how I came to Christ, like, you know, my testimony of being saved. I learned today, like, during my service, is that there's different kinds of testimonies. There's testimonies like when you come to Christ, i.e. being saved, and then there's other testimonies throughout your life that shows example of how God works in our lives. And I just want to specify that the testimony I always recap is how I came to Christ and how I was saved. Okay, so recap is I was born in a Catholic household, you know. Yes, exactly. So I was born in a Catholic household, you know, and like most people born in like a religious household, they end up following the religion they were taught to do when they were younger. And you know, my mom used to take us to church all the time. Eventually down the road, I think around high school, my siblings fell off first, right? And I like going to service with my mom, despite having to wake 6 a.m. in the morning all the time to go to church. But like I used to love going to church with my mom, not because I was like, you know, conscious enough to pay attention to the word. It was mostly because I like singing, right? And in Catholic churches, they sang like hymns. They even had like a hymn book and everything, and like, you know, I was there just to sing that part at the beginning and then at the end of the service, and kind of fall asleep in between. But like, you know, my stepdad at the time, when he did go to with us, would like pinch me awake or something. And then, you know, a lot of ritualistic stuff happens. Like some Sundays you get like hit with holy water, some Sundays they have like the little smoke thing and the little metal thingy, so, and then, you know, obviously the tithing where you put like money in a basket and pass it on, and sometimes communion too. I never really like participated actively in communion because when I was in the Philippines, I went to a Catholic private school, and I found out you can't participate in communion until you've had communion yourself, like your first communion and whatnot. So, well, that's how it is for like Catholics, right? But eventually, like around high school, my siblings fell off, and it was just me and my mom for a while. And then at some point, my mom felt like she wasn't really getting anything out of it, so she kind of just like lost her faith and stopped going to church. And around that time, I was just like, you know, okay, I guess, like, you know, I don't really have a car, I can't really like take myself, and not like I was really interested at the time. I was more like, you know, going with the flow type thing. And I'm like, okay, one less thing to do on like a Sunday. And you know, high school, I was going through the exactly, and then towards the end of high school, well, the end of my second year in high school, like the start of my third year, I was diagnosed with depression, anxiety, suicidal ideations. And even before that, I was going through the whole motion of like trying to figure out my identity, because I realized I'm such a person that just goes with the flow a lot. Like I follow who I stick to and all that stuff. Like I may have an easygoing personality, and you know, I have the qualities of being a leader and all that stuff, but I was more of a follower because I wanted to fit in so much, right? And thinking about it now, from a lot of things I learned through my walk with Christ, is that like fitting in is the worst thing you could do as a Christian, you know, because fitting in means you are being part of the world. And you know, so I was struggling with that a lot in high school, being diagnosed with depression, suicidal ideation, anxiety, and all that stuff. I kept moving from place to place, like physically moving where I live, and then physically moving like high schools multiple times. And then at some point towards college, I became like a self-proclaimed spiritualist. I accept everything and everything, but I won't follow what you're following because, you know, that's just how it is. I'm open-minded to it, but I don't believe in it type thing, you know. And honestly, as you can tell, I didn't know what being a spiritualist is. I just claim to be one type thing. When people would ask like, oh, what religion you had, I'm like, I'm a spiritualist. I accept everything and everything, but I don't follow nothing type thing. I don't know. I just made that up in my head, and I just assumed that's what a spiritualist was. And then it's really funny too, because like during my quote unquote spiritualist phase, I did notice some things because I was studying Japanese culture and all that stuff in college as a secondary major, and I found out, I talked about this with my boyfriend last night, I found out a whole lot of religions stem from the same thing, which is how God created the world, but then they started just like changing the narrative as they went. So if you really think about it, God is still the center of everything. It's just through word of mouth or generations of cultures, they just changed, you know, the true idea of it, and which made it like, you know, kind of its own religion type thing. Anyway, back to my own testimony. So like, I mentioned multiple times that I was suffering through depression, anxiety, and suicidal ideations. I still do, not as much as before, but like I still do. And you know, and every time I was like at my lowest of lows, I always ran into like a pamphlet, a little like card with like a Bible verse, or like, do you want to know more about Jesus? And like it would just appear randomly, somehow in my bag, somehow like on the table I was about to sit in at a random Dunkin' Donuts. Sometimes I would just pick it off the floor, like, oh, what's this? You know, because curiosity. And nobody would like walk up to me and tell me about it. It would just like end up in my hands, and then like the little voice in my head was just like, you know, hey, I know this guy, you know, I learned about him when I was a Catholic, and all that stuff. And I was like, you know, I feel like thinking about it now, it was like God telling me I'm still here, you know, I'm always ready for you to come back to me. And then even though I realized that, I just like shove it down to the back of the recesses of my mind, like forget about it type thing, you know. I'm like, oh, what a coincidence, and all that stuff. And then eventually my depression hit a really hard, like, I don't know what to call it, turn, I guess. Like I just had like a really bad relapse because I broke up with my ex, and I felt like my whole entire world was falling apart with COVID going on, getting kicked out of our house because, you know, my mom was in the medical field and my uncle did not want, you know, to risk it, even though they got COVID before we did. We weren't even there, but like, you know, we were kicked out. We were living in the city for a while. I was like, you know, really at the edge of my cliff, like jumping and like free falling at that point, or like basically like suspended in the air. I don't really know what to call it, because like, you know, I felt like it, I was going, and it got to the point where the closest familial relationship I had, which was with my little brother, literally got snapped because of that, you know. And I was Discord hopping. I was trying to find a place where I could belong, a place where I could be myself, a place where I can open up, which I do normally. I open up to strangers a lot, hence the stream. But like, yeah. And like, eventually I ended up in a server where I met my current boyfriend. He wasn't my boyfriend right away, obviously. Stuff happened. But like, well, stuff had to happen, right? And I found out he was a Christian, right? Well, I already knew this because, one, his name, and two, just his whole disposition, his personality, how kind he is, like, you know, and forgiving he is. It just made no sense to me how nice a person could be. Obviously Christian, right? And then, you know, I started talking to him a lot. I caught feelings. I started to want to get to know him, and being COVID at the time, I also made another friend, and she was also Christian, and she would invite me to her church services online. And, you know, I was curious enough about it to like want to go to their services. And then I guess that kind of like lit a flame in me where I wanted to learn more. I wanted to be sure of what I'm feeling type thing. And then, you know, to be sure of it, I went to my boyfriend. I told him, hey, can I go to your services too? Like, I know you're a Christian, like, and I kind of want to learn more, you know. And because like the reason why he didn't want to share right away, he was afraid that I would like be a Christian because of him and not because I want to. And I thought like that's how little you think of me anyway. But like, yeah, so you know, I ended up going to his streams, and then when I went to visit in person, I even got to go in person, like at his church. I met his pastors, I met like, you know, his church family and all that stuff. And exactly. And then as I got to know him, as I got to spend more time with him, I realized how amazing God's influence in one's life can be, and I kind of wanted that for myself, right? So, like, he taught me how to pray. He taught me, like, a lot of things that I had misconceptions about, like how Mary wasn't really, like, important. Well, she was important because she gave birth to Jesus as a virgin, right? Virgin Mary. But the way the Catholics did it, they think that we should pray to her rather than to Jesus directly. Anyway, like, it's just corrected the small misconceptions and whatnot of things that were taught over the time, and obviously confirming things that I already knew and all that stuff. And as it went on, I felt like I needed more of this on a personal level, where I want to have a relationship with God, right? Because I'm like, the difference I felt staying at his family's house versus mine, I felt less suffocated. I felt like I stopped cursing. Like, I used to curse a lot. I was a cursing sailor. I was one of those people, right? And like, anger wasn't so easy anymore. Like, frustration wasn't so easy anymore. I just felt so relieved, so relaxed. And that's because, like, that God is residing in a place like that, right? And I needed that for me, because I'm not gonna stay with them forever. I have my own house to get back to. So, and then, like, I talked to his pastor, like, about how I feel like I want to accept Jesus as my Lord and Savior, And she told me, oh, you should find, like, a church at your place, like. And okay, I was super offended by that. Not that she meant anything by it, right? I was just like, why can't you invite me to your church, type thing, It doesn't matter if I'm online. But then again, understand, like, it's much better to have a physical home church, right? And, I like gave in. I'm like, okay, but how do I go about it? And all that stuff. And I went home, it was January 23, I think. I went home, and then I was looking up churches near me, and obviously I kind of get weird vibes of the ones that were a lot closer, like the ones like on my street and like a little bit past that. I was like getting weird vibes about it. I was like, I don't think so. And then, yes, exactly. Colossians 4:6. Let your speech always be gracious, seasoned with salt. Yes. But like, I was searching up churches near me, and then I came upon Grace Gospel, right? Okay, so at first I wasn't 100% sure of it, because when I tried to click on the website, again, during COVID they had to go through a lot of stuff, so they were setting up online sources and all that stuff. So I guess I didn't really know how to put a proper website on it, so I kind of got a weird link. But like, I ended up finding the church website anyway, and I read their mission statement, which is to exalt Christ and point others to him. And I was like, oh, that sounds good. And then, I let pastor for my boyfriend's church know, and she's like, you should give it a try. And I was like, okay, and then the Sunday I went, okay, I was really nervous. My first time going by myself. My mom just dropped me off. She wasn't going to come in with me. And then, I was just like, I haven't really gone to church in a while. I don't really know what to do. I don't really know what to expect. And, there's that double door. So I walked in, and then there was a second set of double doors with the welcome team. And, like, okay, the moment I walked through the first double doors, right, I felt like a whoosh, an amazing whoosh that felt warm and, like, like welcoming. Like I didn't know anybody yet. I didn't even speak to anybody yet. But I knew God welcomed me the moment I took a step into that church. He was like, welcome home, type thing. And I was just like overwhelmed already. Like, I was already mid tears, and then like I was walking in even more. I spoke to the welcome team. They gave me a welcome pamphlet. I like showing an example of it lately. But yeah, they gave me a welcome pamphlet. It normally looks like this. It changes like themes, obviously, depending on the season. The date changes, but like it has information on the church and like announcements like throughout the week and all that stuff, and more information on the back, and like a little note section where you can write notes if anything sticks out to you during the word, right? And then, at this point I felt like tears were about to fall, and I was like, they welcomed me. I barely understood what they were saying. Somebody introduced themselves to me. I didn't catch it. They led me to a seat. I sat down. They told me that there's like tissue boxes all at the end, and like a Bible next to it and all that stuff. And then the worship team was going, and I was crying. I was full on crying. The first worship song I ever saw them sing was Egypt, and I remember to this day Egypt by Corey Asbury, because I was crying so much, because the lyrics just like stood out to me so much. Like I felt I just came out of the desert myself. That's how overwhelmed I felt. And like, whatchamacallit, and then the word after, right, literally answered all the questions I had for every single day of my life throughout the years that I was struggling to find where to even start, right? But timeline wise, I came to accept Christ in November 2022. I found my home church in January 23. I got baptized at my church July 23. Yeah. So and it was funny because when I was telling my boyfriend about, like, accepting Christ in my life, I was telling him, like, about the coincidences that I mentioned earlier, and he told me those aren't coincidences, and he was laughing, and I'm like, why are you laughing at me? It's not funny. He's like, I'm just saying, because God's always there to let me know he's around, and that I shouldn't forget that, and that in my worst times I should go to him. Obviously I didn't know at the time, but like now I do and whatnot. But yeah, that's like my testimony of being saved and coming to Christ, and also the start of my walk with Christ. I have a lot of things I want to talk about today. As you guys might have noticed, the title today is forgiveness, something we all struggle to do, forgive somebody, right? And the reason why I wanted to talk about this is because that's kind of what we went over at church, right? And it was on my mind, like, thank you. It was on my mind, like, the past few Sundays. What was that parable I keep thinking about? Because, when I read Genesis over about the relationship between Esau and Jacob, I was like, I feel like I thought they were the parable, but in reality it wasn't. So, it's alright. But, like, there's a parable that was stuck in my head that I couldn't really exactly remember, and today at service, my pastor mentioned it towards the end, the parable of the lost son. That was a parable I was thinking about the whole time from Luke chapter 15, but I'll get to that eventually. Today at church, my pastor talked about forgiveness, right? And he opened up, obviously, like, have you ever had a problem forgiving someone? And I'm like, I have problems forgiving people. And it's not like I don't want to. It's like in our flesh and our human nature to be so angry, resentful, and blame everybody but ourselves. And sometimes we do blame ourselves, but, like, not in a way that makes sense. Like, not in a repentful way, but, like, more like even worse. And then my pastor also mentioned how unforgiveness, resentment, bitterness, anger, and all that stuff is a prison, right? And I'm like, and it's a prison you put yourself in, and it's something that's really hard to get out. Because the reason why I know I have trouble forgiving somebody is that I like to recall the past a lot, right? I'm the type of person who, like to hold people accountable, whether they realize it or not. And especially even after I talk to them about it, the fact that they have no, like, willingness to change or to want to be or to want to, like, acknowledge that they have faulted against me, that kind of makes my resentment grow more, and I become more bitter and all that stuff. And it's obviously not going to show right away, right? It's going to be very subtle, but then, like, again, that, like, kills me personally. I get put in that prison personally because I have trouble breathing. I get so frustrated by every little thing they do, like, and they become the reason why I'm so negative about life. That they become the reason why I have, like, a negative outlook on my life, and that's because I put myself in that situation to allow that to happen because I can't forgive them. And as easy as it sounds, it's so hard to forgive a person, especially when you feel like they have wronged you and they don't want to fix that. Exactly, right? So the story about Jonah, oh bro, that book was way too short, I'm not gonna lie. But, like, the story of Jonah, like, he was sent to go to Nineveh, but he refused because he didn't want to forgive them for past things that happened. And in Jonah 4:4, it said, like you put in the chat, is it right for you to be angry? God understands why we are angry, but is it correct is the real question, which is true, right? Like, it's in our right to be upset, but we shouldn't really hold on to that. We shouldn't let that fester because, we still have to get past that hurdle, right? We still have to get past that hurdle and learn to forgive, to be more loving, to love more like Jesus, Despite all the stuff Jesus went through, in the 4 books of gospel, despite everything he went through, he still forgave us. He still died on the cross for us, taking upon all of the sins of the world. And he beat it, he got resurrected 3 days after, like, despite everything that was done to him. I was so angry. I'm still watching Chosen, and I get so frustrated, like, why do you do that? Like, why are we doing that? Why are we so this and that? you know, and yet Jesus still forgives, right? Matthew 6:15. But if you do not forgive other sins, your Father will not forgive your sins. Exactly. We are to be seasoned with salt when we can love and forgive. Yes, yes. Like, you know, like the okay. So I'm reading the Bible over again, like the Bible plan, and it really slows down for me around Leviticus. I'm almost gonna hit Numbers. I'm not looking forward to that, but like, you know, but I noticed like a lot of the laws of Moses is like an eye for an eye and all that stuff. And I was like, why are the laws like this? I was like, why is it so not what we learn, right? But then again, if you think about it, it was like Old Testament type thing, right? And now it's like turn the other cheek type thing. And like a lot of the times, new Christians shouldn't really start with the Old Testament because there's a lot of misconceptions when you do, right? And, you know, again, it's really hard to forgive people, right? And as much as you think about it logically, your feelings will kind of get in the way of that. You know, your flesh will get in the way of that, and that the enemy feeds off of that. The enemy wants you to be stuck in your negative emotions so that you are unable to forgive somebody. Exactly. It reveals sins, but never meant to save. Exactly. But yeah, so my pastor said a quote that unforgiveness is a poison you drink, hoping for the other person will get sick, right? But that's the thing too, because a lot of the times you might be angry that somebody has slighted against you, but they don't even know it, and you're just basically poisoning yourself that whole time, you know, and that's awesome. But like, you know, and I noticed that like whenever I'm in the car with my sister, she does this weird like curse hand sign thing. I'm not even gonna do it, but like apparently her friend taught her that. But the moment somebody like cuts her off or something like super minor inconvenience, and she starts cursing them out, saying, "I hope this and that to your future generations, all that and all, cancer, blah blah blah," and I'm like, what are you on? Like that's like to truly and fully hope for somebody to have the most misfortune you could think of is kind of frustrating because like, you know, that's not really nice. Like not it's way more than not being nice. It's like that shit of evil, you know. And I know my sister goes through stuff. I know she's still going through stuff because, you know, honestly it just shows in her whole person. Exactly, right? And that's one of the things I fear for my sister because I love her a lot. Like, she's my family. And it's more than just being family. I truly do love her, even whether or not she believes it, because sometimes I do get angry at her, but that's like out of love. Like, you know, I can't do anything to help her with what she's going through, especially if she doesn't open up. And out of my entire family, she's the most repulsed by me being a Christian. She's the most repulsed whenever I sing my worship songs. It gets to the point where she tried to get out of the car while it was moving. And I'm like, that's kind of crazy, you know? And also super dangerous because I really hope she hasn't hit that part of her life where she's so hard, her heart is so hardened that she won't be able to accept Jesus. I still pray for her every day because I really don't want that for her, you know? There's only so much I can do too. But yeah, so yesterday we talked about Esau and Jacob and how Jacob was preparing to meet Esau. So for this one about forgiveness, Jacob finally was able to meet Esau, right? And I don't know why, but when I reread Genesis, I don't remember this part. I was probably very sleepy when I was reading it. But when Jacob finally got to meet Esau, it was like Esau was like a completely different person. He ran over to meet Jacob and threw himself to hug him and kiss him. And, you know, and obviously Jacob was really surprised. I would be surprised too. Like, who are you? Like, the person who wanted to kill me, all of a sudden you forgave me? And you're so loving? And, like, you know, I'm honestly, props to that for Esau. 20 whole years of anger and resentment, and yet he was able to forgive Jacob the moment they met. And the 400 men that Jacob was afraid that would kill him was actually meant to be there to protect him. Esau prepared all that for Jacob. And what pissed me off even more was that towards the end, Jacob still deceived Esau even after being forgiven. I'm like, bro, what are you doing? You know? But I wrote some notes about that. So when Esau forgave Jacob, my pastor was talking about like the blessings received and all that stuff, and how Esau received a blessing from his father about like not being yoked to Jacob anymore, right? Not sharing the yoke anymore. And as my pastor was talking about it, this is my personal thought. Like I feel like the thanks to that blessing, Esau was able to let go of his resentment for Jacob, therefore being able to forgive him because of the blessing that was given to him, that he won't be yoked anymore to Jacob. That's just my personal assumption of what could have happened, because again, they don't really go deep into how and why it happened, but Esau was able to forgive him. The Bible never really like delved into that either. And my pastor was like, he said not to question it, not to assume, not to think too much about it. It's just like, it happened and thank God that it did. Because like it was also mentioned in the Bible that Esau was not a godly man. So we don't know how it happened. We don't know what really led him to have a change of heart, but we're like thankful for that, right? And I struggle with that too, right? So that's like very true, very relatable, right? Even though every Sunday we pull ourselves together and like we feel like we're right again, we're redeemed, we're back set with our eyes in Jesus, right? It's really hard to follow through the rest of the days because life happens, right? And we're not perfect Christians, right? We're gonna continue to struggle because that's just how it is. We're gonna keep fighting against our flesh. Exactly, right? Yes, we also have to. That's something I have to struggle with too, like forgiving myself. But we also have to understand as Christians, we're not going to be perfect no matter how many times we get forgiven. Whether it's like intentionally or unintentionally, we will still sin. We just have to catch ourselves and obviously continue to repent, right? And it's not to the point where like, you have to start, being depressed about it or anxious about it, because it's all, you give it all to God, right? Our only job, the only thing that we could possibly give him is more people to join us up in heaven at the end, right? The only thing we could possibly do to God, because we're humans, we can't do anything without him. We can literally do nothing for him. He needs nothing from us, right? All he wants is us. He wants us, right? And obviously we still have to change and like repent and all that stuff, but like we don't necessarily have to do anything to receive that forgiveness, because as long as we have our relationship with God, as long as we keep relying on him, no matter how many times we struggle in sin, right, and we keep coming back to him, right, the main part is coming back to him, and spread word about Jesus, save other people. Well, we can't save other people, but like, let them be saved, right? Help them be saved, right? That's the only thing we can do right now as human beings on this earth. And that's gonna be a struggle because not a lot of people take well to hearing about the Bible and all that stuff. Yeah, that's true. And that's the good thing, right? The moment that you fell into it and it felt worse the second time, that's how you know the Holy Spirit's already working in you. Because the fact that you felt terrible, like the fact that you actually felt that it wasn't a good thing, that means God's work is happening, right? You still have the Holy Spirit in you. And you're able to, pinpoint like, hey, I fell back into sin, right? I want to get back up. And that's okay. It'll happen over and over. It's happened to me multiple times too. I'm not gonna lie. Like honestly, I feel like a lot of the things I've been doing the past week, is piling up, and I get afraid that like I end up falling back to how I was before, and that's why I picked up the Bible again. I'm trying to attend like Bible studies. I'm trying to have people in my fellowship, like I'm trying to spend more time with them. I'm trying to add more of God in my life, right? And it's not really easy, right? If picking up the Bible's too hard for you, try to pray. And not pray asking for something, but like have a conversation with God, like a one-to-one, right? I know I'm saying it as if it's easy, right? I struggle with that too, right? But like sometimes, yeah, he asks. He asks something else 3 times instead, and Exactly, because God's forgiving, right? He loves us and He is righteous. Yes, do you love me 3 times? And and just the fact that that's all He wants from us, to love Him and to have a relationship with Him. Isn't that amazing enough as it is? Right? I'm not saying to be like complacent about it. I'm not saying to be complacent about it, because like some people like fall into that sin of being complacent, right? Like, just remember that God will love you and will always be there for you no matter how many times you fall, because He will help you get back up again. And the fact that you feel terrible about sinning is enough. That's how you know you still have a relationship with God, and you can keep repenting, and that you can keep going. And God will never ever ever leave us unless we ourselves sever that relationship with Him. And that's why I fear of my family members having a hardened heart where they don't want their relationship with God, right? That's the one thing I fear the most, and that's the one thing I'm trying to change, And obviously I got to start with myself, because if I don't show the qualities that I'm learning about that Jesus have, who are they to want to change, right? Because I experience the qualities of other people because I put myself in a situation where I could be open-minded about it, that I can be open to it, and that thankfully led me back to God, and now I have a relationship with Him again. And yeah, sinning is inevitable, right? Even micro ones, hopefully not major ones, but it happens. But that doesn't mean we should beat ourselves up for it, because that's what the enemy wants. He wants us to think so bad of ourselves that we no longer want to go back to God. And that's something I'm struggling with, because again, with the history of depression and anxiety, I end up beating myself over something that I really shouldn't, and that I need to learn personally to give it up to God and let Him handle it, so that I can work on myself and have better self-esteem. Because God made you in His likeness. God made everybody in His likeness. The fact that we hate ourselves means that we're hating God's creation, and that's like a terrible thing. I know that logically, but I need to understand that with my heart, type thing. It's complicated. Life's complicated. I'm so glad you're lifing with me. What was I talking about? So yeah, Esau forgave him, and I'm like, that's not something I can do, because I'm not. Okay, I may seem like a forgiving person, but it depends on how much you have slighted me, right? It could be like a minor thing, a minor inconvenience, and I'll be okay with it. But if it's something that honestly strikes the wrong chord with me, I end up being the least forgiving person ever. And it's not like I want to. Again, that feeds into the negativity that the enemy uses and takes control of your flesh, and it's kind of hard to fight against that, right? Because forgiveness is one of the hardest things to do, right? I feel like it's equally as hard as loving somebody, because we were taught to also love our enemies too, right? Because you love the person, not the sin, right? And love goes hand in hand with forgiveness, right? And especially if you love somebody, be it a family member or something, the resentment is even stronger, because you kind of hold it against them whether you like it or not, right? And I have an example for that, right? Again, I mentioned how much I love my sister, but honestly I resent her for a lot of the things that she did in my life, because I just feel that it's really unfair that she continually attacks me just for being myself, and my struggle to stay alive, and my struggle with my walk with Christ, because she is jealous of it, right? And I know she's jealous of it because one of her manipulation tactics is projection. And no matter how aware of it I am, I still hold that anger in my heart. And that's one of the prisons I'm in that I can't seem to break free from, because I still live with her, right? And I can't really hold it against her. I'm more afraid for her, Exactly. And I understand that logically, but it's so hard for me to actually put it into action, right? Because of all the feelings I have. It's just, it's a struggle we have to learn to overcome. And even though it's the hardest thing, you can always start small, right? So first, obviously, I gotta learn to forgive myself, right? And then I can start forgiving other people, because I still blame myself for a lot of things. I still hate myself for a lot of things, and I'm working on it. And even though I know, I still need a constant reminder, like reassurance, if you will. And it's just, it's because I'm the type that once I'm isolated from the world, that's when I start hearing more of the enemy rather than of God. And an important point on that, right? Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm glad you see it, at least. I mean, people have been telling me that too, but I still need to learn to believe it myself. But I really appreciate that. Thank you. But like, an important thing I wanted to point out is one of the application questions the pastor asked towards the end of the sermon. He said, "What is your heart filled with?" Right? Yes, small faith, tiny mustard seed. Yeah, that's why I still call myself a baby Christian, But yeah, my pastor asked a really important question towards the end of the sermon. He was like, "What is your heart filled with?" Right? Bitterness or Christ? Right? And obviously, my answer to that question was like, my honest answer to that question is right now it's anger and resentment, and maybe a little bit of shame after today's service, right? But then he also pointed out, exactly. But then he also pointed out, bitterness will push Christ's influence out, right? All the negative emotions that is in your heart will push out Christ's influence, and that's what makes it even harder for us to learn to forgive and love other people, because we dwell on that negativity too much, And he also pointed out something really, really awesome, is that if you're filled with so much of the Holy Spirit, there will be no room for bitterness and anger and resentment and all that other negative stuff. And I'm like, oh, one day I wish I'm there. One day, one day. But yeah, and obviously, back to what you mentioned before about like the struggle. So he mentioned a question, are you staying connected to Christ, right? Yes, we fall all the time. Yes, we trip up on ourselves, right? As long as you stay connected to Christ, you'll be fine. Because, again, He's our salvation. He's the only one who can save us from ourselves, right? As long as we stay connected to Him, no matter how many mistakes we make, He'll keep forgiving us, right? As long as we don't do, like, the number one thing, blasphemy against the Holy Spirit. Obviously that's, like, kind of a given. Why would you, right? But, like, yeah. Yeah, as long as you stay connected to Christ, He can pull us up no matter how many times we fall. I remember there's this one illustration I saw on a reel. I don't know where I can pull it up exactly. But like, I don't know exactly how to describe it, but I'm gonna try the best as I can. It's like two people walking on a beach, right? You see footsteps from behind, and then all of a sudden there's like one less footsteps. It's not because God left us, right? It's because we're struggling, we're depressed, and He picks us up. He keeps walking, holding us up, And I love that so much about that, because, no matter what, no matter how much you struggle, He's still there. He's not going to leave us, right? And just the thought of that, honestly, makes me feel so relieved, Feels relieved. Like that, even if I slip up, right? As long as I recognize it, repent, and go back to God, I'll be fine. Because He's always waiting for us. The only reason why He wouldn't be in our lives is because we're the ones who stepped away. Exactly. That literally made me cry. I was in tears when I saw that at the end. Yes. Thank you for bringing it up, because I forgot about it. Like, why did it seem like you left me in those times where the footsteps disappeared? He said, I carried you. That was awesome, I find that really awesome. Another important application question the pastor asked towards the end was like, have you experienced the power of God's forgiveness in your life, right? And this goes back to how I mentioned I learned that there's different kinds of testimonies, right? I probably have a lot of times in my life where I experienced the power of God's forgiveness in my life. And one of them is not a very savory, like, recollection, if I'm gonna be honest. Because, again, before I came to Christ, I was with my ex, right? And, like, I mentioned before how I grew up in a Catholic household. But like, I still truly believed in my heart that I will never give up my body to anybody unless I know that I'm gonna marry them, right? And I was young and dumb. I was in college, and I ended up giving myself to him, not knowing that he was gonna break up with me, right? So that broke me even more. And honestly, I felt like the love I had for my ex wasn't true love for like a connection, a relationship, a commitment. It was more like a desperation to be seen, and obviously he wasn't feeding into that anymore. So even though I was like really broken after he broke up with me, when I realized that I was more than that, that like he wasn't really providing what I needed, and that I needed something like God in my life, like obviously I was able to change and move on from that. But one of the forgiveness I felt was I was still holding on to that, right? That I gave up my body to somebody who is no longer in my life. And I was struggling with that thought because I'm like, I'm with a Christian. I'm a Christian now, and I have that in my history. I have that. I lost my virginity, and like I was really hung up on that. And then one Sunday I went to church. The reason why I was able to feel God's forgiveness was they mentioned like God doesn't want you for your past. You can become anew with Him, right? Not saying you can keep doing it, right? It's like it doesn't matter what happened in your past. What happens is now that you have accepted Christ, now that you have like started your walk with Him, just don't do it again, you know. And the relief I felt after hearing about that, like there was a verse they mentioned. I don't exactly remember word for word what it was, but like the relief I felt that like God forgave me for something like that, really, like, I don't know, I just didn't know how to take it. I was like, I'm like, how do I even go about this? Like, I understand I'm forgiven for that, but like it still weighs on my heart. But like the fact that He took that pain away from me, that guilt, that shame away from me, honestly, it felt so relieving. Experiencing that kind of godly forgiveness was amazing, and like to me at least. And obviously I had to talk about it to my current boyfriend about all that stuff, and I was able to experience it again, right? I was finally able to open up to him. Exactly. I was finally able to open up to my boyfriend, and I told him, and he's like, it doesn't really matter, like that was before you met me. I won't hold it against you, like I'm thankful that you're able to share that with me, but we can move on from that. And I honestly felt like, I think I did cry. Actually, I cried a lot, and even to this day, right? I feel so much shame in general, and how I mentioned before how much I hate myself and all that stuff, like how I'm not deserving of love. And you mentioned earlier my genuine love for Christ, or my want to have a relationship with Him, but I don't reserve any of that for myself, right? Like I can give like God's love to somebody else, but for some reason I struggle to show it to myself. For some reason I struggle to forgive myself, and that's one of the things my boyfriend is trying to like help me with, because he's like, I'm also a person of God. I should also give some of that love to myself, and I'm struggling to want to do it willingly, and yeah, it's really hard. So back to my title, forgiveness. I need to learn to forgive myself first if I want to fully give it to other people. Thank you. I'll also pray for you too. Yeah, I think I went over everything. I want to end the stream with going over the parable of the lost son, because I honestly really love that parable. It's one of my favorite parables. Let me just open the Bible app. Shout out to the Bible app on the phone, YouVersion Bible app. I keep doing that. Luke 15. Luke chapter 15. It's towards the end. So it's verse 11 through 32, the parable of the lost son. Jesus continued, There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, "Father, give me my share of the estate." So he divided his property between them. Not long after that, the younger son got together all he had, set out for a distant country, and there squandered his wealth in wild living. Right? So, those first 11, 12, 13, 3 verses, yeah. Yeah, the prodigal son. I don't know if my Bible says the parable of the lost son. But, the first 3 verses, I completely like related to that because that's kind of what I went through in college, you know. I gave up so much of myself expecting love for other people, but they didn't really love me, right? They loved what I offered them. And then continuing on, verse 14. After he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in the whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country, who sent him to his fields to feed pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. When he came to his senses, he said, "How many of my father's hired servants have food to spare, and here I am starving to death? I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants.' So he got up and went to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him, and he was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son and threw his arms around him and kissed him. The son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his servants, 'Quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.' So they began to celebrate." Yeah. I honestly thought I was gonna cry in the stream while reading it because I was crying when I was reading it earlier. But verse 25. Meanwhile, the older son was in the field. When he came near the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called one of the servants and asked him what was going on. "Your brother has come," he replied, "and your father has killed a fattened calf because he has him back safe and sound." The older brother became angry and refused to go in. So his father went out and pleaded with him. But he answered his father, "Look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never gave me a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours who has squandered your property with prostitutes comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him." "My son," the father said, "you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found." Honestly, I relate to both brothers, right? Obviously, different parts for the younger brother, but the main lesson of this one is actually about the older brother that felt resentment and, thought that it was unfair that they got to celebrate for the younger son, right? And that's something we need to learn about, is that we need to learn to let go of that resentment and learn to forgive and be happy that he came back and was saved. He learned his lesson, he came back, and now he's a different person. We need to learn to accept that. And honestly, that ties in with forgiveness and how hard it is to do, especially with the resentment we tend to hold on to a lot, but yeah, it's not always easy to forgive somebody, right? But that's one of the reasons why I really like this parable so much. I relate to the younger son and I relate to the older son. I can't relate to the father who forgave so easily though. But I digress. And yeah. I kind of want to end with a worship song. It's called "Good Good Father" by Chris Tomlin. It's a really good song. Honestly, it reminds me of how good God is to us and how exactly, yes. That means the Father's love is indeed inexhaustible. He will always be waiting for you, ready to forgive you with open arms. Exactly. But this worship song is to emphasize on how good the Lord is to us, right? And obviously, not a lot of people have proper father figures to look up into their lives. And if you don't, obviously, we can look at God Himself, right? Because I don't really have a proper father figure. My sperm donor, I call him that. Biological father, I call him sperm donor. My stepfather, both of them are out of my lives, you know, and I don't have a proper father figure. And the only one I can look up to right now as a father figure is God Himself, right? He's the only one I can rely on, and that is how it should be. But this worship song, "Good Good Father" by Chris Tomlin, emphasizes on that. So I'm just gonna sing that, and then we'll end the stream after. I've 1,000 stories of what they think you're like, but I've heard the tender whispers of love in the dead of night, and you tell me that you're pleased and that I'm never alone. You're a good, good father. It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are. And I'm loved by you. It's who I am. It's who I am. It's who I am. Oh, I've seen many searching for answers far and wide, but I know we're all searching for answers only you provide, 'cause you know just what we need before we say a word. You're a good, good father. It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are. And I'm loved by you. It's who I am. It's who I am. It's who I am. Perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways to us. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways to us. It's love so undeniable, I can hardly speak. Peace so unexplainable, I can hardly think. Call me deeper still as you call me, deeper still as you call me, deeper still into love, love. You're a good, good father. It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are. And I'm loved by you. It's who I am. It's who I am. It's who I am. You're a good, good father. It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are. And I'm loved by you. It's who I am. It's who I am. It's who I am. But yeah, God is an amazing father. He loves us. He will continue to forgive us, right? He's always there for us, and He knows what we need before we ask. And yeah, learn to forgive people, even though it's really hard. But that's what I want to end with today. Thank you for coming. I really appreciate you chatting with me in the chat, Mango. And I hope to see you guys next Sunday. Bye!